Hi, it's Kamon Reynolds. We're in our package versus nuke challenge, and we've got some big updates. I apologize that we haven't been quite as timely on our inspections on these colonies, but we've been so busy. The fall flow was not exceptional by any means, and we had about 2 months without rain, and so we had to do a lot of supplemental feeding this year. In some years we have to put on supers, so that's just one thing you're going to have to understand when it comes to your area. Some areas are more consistent nectar producers. Some areas, especially in the drier parts out west, you don't get a whole lot when your bees really need it, and we like big healthy clusters. And these bees have been smoked down, and there's a pretty good bit of bees in here. Now these apivar strips need to be taken out, but they've done a good job. The only thing we've been using on these colonies over here this year is oxalic acid vapor and apivar, which I think is a great combination. I know a lot of people don't want to use the apivar, and I understand that. Apiguard does very good, and it's a more natural treatment. Of course, none of these products are supposed to be used when the honey supers are on. None of the products that we use anyway, so none of these boxes are going to be used for honey supers. Now, that's a pretty good bit of brood for just a day from November. So I'm pretty happy with that. And the thing of it is, that's just one frame right there. I know a lot of people say don't stick this stuff on the ground. Well, we do a lot of things people don't recommend. Seems to work. Doesn't mean I recommend you do it. Now, hey, I got an update. Like I said, we haven't been able to get to all this stuff as much as we would have liked. But a few weeks ago, we've just been busy feeding and everything. I was getting into these things, and I ended up having to replace the queen in this colony as well, because the Italian was not laying very good, and then she was also laying some drones and worker cells, which is a terrible sign this part of the season. Nope. And there's our carny queen right there. They took off a lot of the green paint. I probably didn't give her enough time to dry before I stuck her in. But there she is. She's pretty slim because she's not laying as much. But look at all this brood that they've got in here. For almost November, that's really good. That is really nice. Young queens will lay further into the fall. Wow, there's all kinds of eggs and stuff over here as well. And they will start laying quicker coming out of winter. So that is one reason why many professional beekeepers requeen their colonies every year. Now keep in mind, it really varies from area to area, because if you're in southern Alabama or somewhere where we have a long brooding season, your queens aren't going to last as long as the queens up in Canada, because they brood twice as long. So that makes a big difference on your queen. They only have so much egg laying and sperm stored up, and once they start running out, they're just not as attractive to the bees. And we don't fully understand how all the dynamics work in the hive, but what we do know is that percentages are a big deal to bees, whether it's in nectar foraging, whether it's in brood rearing, whether it's mites chipping away at the percentages or some other pest or disease. Percentages are everything, and the difference between some small numbers, 5%, 10%, can make a big difference in total honey yield, or how successfully they go through winter, how good they forage going into fall. Just percentages are everything. So many professional beekeepers, especially those who live in long season areas, requeen every year. And I know some people think that this is bad, and it is not. That does not mean that we don't identify those colonies that are exceptional and stick them separately and breed for longevity and certain traits. So we don't let all of our colonies just go on indefinitely, because that is a good way to lose some beehives unnecessarily, because just things like this hive, that queen was starting to go downhill in fall. That's like the worst time she could do it. The mite loads are very low. I need to do an alcohol wash on this colony. But between the oxalic acid vapor and the apivar, the bees look very clean with eyeball test. And we'll be giving them more oxalic acid vapor once all the brood is cleared up. Look at all this brood. It's almost November. Look how clean those bees look. One thing we need to talk about a little bit more is just the nutritional side of things. We had to feed these bees pollen patty, and sugar syrup, or in our case, Pro Sweet, in fall, because again, our fall flow was just not that good. So we took the time and invested a little bit more dollars into our bees because the fall flow wasn't exceptional this year, or even average. And our bees still look very good because we addressed the nutritional decline that we had this year, and nature just didn't provide it. You can't count on nature. Nature doesn't care if your bees survive. I know a lot of people want to think that nature and the bees are just going to always harmoniously get along. That is not how nature works at all. That is not even close to how nature works at all. Nature will kill 100% of your bees if your bees do not meet certain prerequisites for what it takes to survive in your area, etc. Now in my area it's very mild. Bees do not winter kill here. For those of you who are Tennessee, Kentucky, nearby states, bees don't winter kill here in cold weather. They will die in the winter, but it's not because of cold temperatures. I don't even insulate my beehives. This is my first year I'm tinkering around with insulation. And we're going to be doing some more videos on that, because especially the further north you are, the more advantages there are to it. But the main thing with any place that you're located is dead mites, a good bee population that are clean and young. We have lost, there's small piles of dead bees in front of every hive that we have. And no, it wasn't pesticides. Those are old forager bees, older bees that are no longer needed. They don't need to be eating our honey stores going into winter. They just need to die. And that's what the colony decides to do. The bees sacrifice themselves. There's a lot to that. The bees are all about doing what's best for the colony. Sometimes to their own individual peril. But that's what it takes. That's the way they are programmed. Let's look and see how we're doing on the honey store front, because we still have enough time to do a little bit of feeding here in Tennessee. Plus there's emergency methods of feeding, which we will be doing soon. Get out of the way. Alright, so we have a little bit of honey over here, not much. A lot of small hive beetles. Look at all those small hive beetles in that corner coming out. You know why they're over there? That's the edge of the brood nest. The beetles want the brood and they want the protein in the bee bread. The bees, because they're healthy, are harassing them into the corners and bullying them over there and keeping them there. There's a little bit of eggs over here, goodness gracious. But sadly, in some ways, we have no packaged queens left. So next year, all of these colonies that come out of winter are going to be from ours. Now, I'm going to get this apivar strip out of here as well. Don't touch it with your fingers, but you can get the nail if you can get a hold of it, or the toothpick, or whatever you decide to use. I found little pieces of brush before, like honeysuckle vine, and used that. Honeysuckle vine works good for a lot of different things. Alright. Now, by the way, there was brood on 5 frames in this colony. 5 frames. Almost November. Of course, we're fairly mild. There's not hardly any honey in these 2 frames at all. So there's not a whole lot of honey in the bottom of the hive. Let's go ahead and put this bottom and check the top. Okay, we're going to try to put things back together. Now, this time of the year, I'm more adamant about putting everything back the way you got it. Especially in cooler times of the season, you don't want to split that brood up. Now, when it's warm, sometimes it's advantageous to split the brood up, and I know a lot of people will argue with me on that one. Oh, that's just some nice looking brood right there. But sometimes we move the brood around to free up some room for the queen to lay, entice her into some empty drawn combs, and that way it'll reduce the swarming tendency. Sometimes we do it to help them want to draw the foundation that we put into the colony, because they're going to have to come around that brood. And so they just see that foundation like, you know what, we need to draw this out. Look at all those bees. And they just look so healthy. They look clean. Look at this brood right here. And by the way, if you have some frames like this, uh-oh, I missed a staple right there. That'll be alright. Bees will build around it. Look at all these puncture holes right here. That is from where I smoke the bees, and they're going in there and puncturing into the cappings and filling themselves on that honey, which discourages them from focusing on me. And that smoke, that's how that helps. They just go in there and they poke some holes in there and start eating it. Now, all this foundation right here, what I was going to get to, as the bees grow next year in the main flow, they're going to draw that out. Maybe not all of it, but they'll draw a decent bit of it out. Oops, I scuffed up some brood. Now look at all this bee bread down in here. That's great. That is really awesome. We finally got a little rain and they started bringing in a little bit of pollen late. And feeding them the pollen patties helped them not to have to use all of their bee bread up. There's a pretty good bit of brood over here too. A lot of it's hatching out. And that extra bit of bee bread is going to be invaluable when they start coming out of the winter. They're not really using a whole lot of it now. They're starting to shrink down. Now, I could throw a patty in here. I don't know if I'm going to or not. Alright. Now we need to put these frames back together, but look at all those bees. I'm pretty sure this colony needs some feed. It felt not super light in the top box, but let's go ahead and stick that top box on, and then we're going to get into that real quick. These packages, none of them drew out all of their combs. Yeah, there's a little weight in there. Watch out. There we go. Whew. All right. Yeah, we're going to probably feed a gallon into this one of Pro Sweet. Now look what the bees have done over here. They built up this wax ladder to walk up and down. And they didn't do that just like, hey, let's build that so it's easier to collect the syrup. They just did that because it was some space that they wanted to fill. But I've got the floats down in here. A good healthy colony doesn't even really need those. Alright, so let's check these honey frames right here. If you look down in here, you can see that most of them, the frames have not been drawn all the way. Well, nice, Kamon. Alright. You see I got some capped honey over here. Everything's just glued down so much right now. And this is where it's nice to have 9 frames because you can see how these frames are butt up against each other and they've glued them. It makes it a little bit harder to pull them apart. These are Kelly frames up here. Look at these are old Kelly frames. Now Kelly doesn't have these anymore. Got the Kelly frames here. I don't really like them. Now, since they were bought out by Man Lake, they're selling these frames that are much straighter, stronger, more uniform. Let's pull these out and see what we've got here. It actually looks like they've been drawn a little bit of comb. Yeah, I mean, look at that. That's not much. I'm probably going to feed a couple gallons of this colony. I've been feeding them a little bit, but they're growing still. It's just awesome. Now, we're fixing to get some 29, 30 degree days coming up. Yeah. There's just not a lot of drawn comb up here. So we're just going to feed them really hard. Over here, this is what we need to do. Because we've got some drawn combs over here, and I'm sure I stuck the drawn combs to the outside, hoping in the fall flow they would draw those in the center. Yeah, that's really heavy right there. Oh yeah, that's what we need. I would prefer to have this whole box full of honey. Probably a little bit more than what they needed, but better safe than sorry. And it's much easier to feed when it's warm than in winter months, but we'll show you how to emergency feed as well. Now we could reduce the bees down to 1 box, but they would be really cramped, and with all the brood and everything that they have, I mean, they don't really have a whole lot of room to be storing syrup right now. So we're going to stick this foundation over here. I know a lot of people are like, this is not the way you do things. It's the way I do things. Alright. And again, we're in a mild area. Probably most of you, it would be better just to pull this whole box off and just shrink them down to 1 box. But I'm not going to do that because I don't want to have to take the time of storing this somewhere. And that's a lot of the times why I have double deeps on my colonies. It's just, I don't want to have to store it. Just leave it on the bees. They'll do fine. If the bees can't survive in a double deep, then they're too weak, in my opinion. They should have a healthy enough cluster to be able to survive in a double deep, and again, that's here in Tennessee. Oh man, I just love the smell of that Nazanov. It just smells so good. I wish I could get that in a bottle. I'd spray it like cologne on my shirt whenever I go to a bee meeting. The beekeepers would go crazy. Laurel probably wouldn't go with me though. Alright, so definitely need some feed. We're going to fill this all the way up, and we're going to fill it again next week. So we've taken our Apivar strips. Maybe when I come back next week we can do an alcohol wash on this colony, but now all of these Package versus Nuke Challenge have our carny queens in them. And hopefully everything's going to look pretty good. Seeing that cluster down there, as long as they have food, these bees are going to do really good for us. They just need a little bit more food to make sure they can go through the winter, but I'm pretty happy. So just remember, great queens, dead mites, good nutrition. Sometimes nature doesn't give you one of those things, but that doesn't mean you can't step in there and do what a beekeeper does and keep your bees. Thanks for watching the video.